Good afternoon and welcome to Lunch with the League. My name is Kim Gravel and I have the honor of being your host for this webinar entitled Who Can Afford to Live in SLO County? The Economic and Social Impacts of a Diverse Housing Supply. Before I introduce our moderator for today, I have a couple of quick announcements. The first is this webinar is being recorded and it will be available for viewing on our League's YouTube channel, which you can access through our website. Also, there will be time at the end of the webinar for questions from the audience. So if you do have some questions, please type them in the Q&A section, and we'll do our best to answer as many of your questions as possible. It is now my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's webinar. Michael Foote is the Director of Economic Development and Community Affairs for Reach Central Coast. Michael's background in management and stakeholder engagement spans over a decade. Prior to joining Reach, Michael served as branch manager at SLO, as well as recently as community engagement coordinator for Habitat for Humanity. He holds a master's in public policy from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. And this combination of background and education have enabled Michael to engage deeply into policies related to community planning, specifically in the area of housing and homelessness. And it is now my pleasure to turn it over to Michael Foote.
Thank you so much, Kim. Just getting some slides up. Hoping that everybody can see that. All right, I recognize that some of you are listening today to hear the answer to the question that we posed, but I want to just start out by saying that our goal with this panel isn't so much to answer the question as it is to move the conversation forward. And really by connecting the idea that local policies, guidelines, community attitudes, really things that we all control have an impact on home prices, and then ultimately who can afford to live here. I believe that we consciously want to live in inclusive communities, but don't always realize the impact that our decisions have on the makeup of that community. And I realize that many of you have been following this important series, so I'm going to skip past some of how we got here and really just jump right in. So with that said, the topic of housing can sometimes break people's brains. We're told that there isn't enough supply, yet we see homes being built more than ever. And we feel like our neighbors are getting a little bit more crowded. And we just know that there's plenty of vacant Airbnbs to go around. But the reality is that families are leaving the Central Coast, and companies that could provide high-paying jobs are deterred from locating here because of our limited housing options for the workforce. And for local businesses ready to expand, housing is absolutely the #1 factor in attracting and retaining local employees, which in turn impacts our entire community's economic resilience. So this is in part because we have so much catch up to do in terms of supply, but also because we have built a system that works best at two extremes. And that, when I'm saying two extremes of this housing continuum that you see here. We have subsidized housing for the lowest income households and market rate housing for everyone else. What is missing in these extremes is the gradient of options that you see in the graphic above. And I'm just going to add here. Actually, I do just want to stop. Do I have graphics showing? Can I get confirmation?
Yes, but
okay, thank you.
Click on your start slideshow.
I had a feeling it was not showing. One more time. Apologies for technical difficulties, everybody. How about that? That looks a little better.
Good.
Thank you so much. Just jumping right in a little too fast. Okay. So the gradient of housing that I'm talking about here, really, stretching from homeless emergency shelters to market rate homes. And I just want to also add here that, we used to build a much wider range, and the regions with a wider diversity of housing types are doing much better in the economic landscape. And from an economic perspective, an efficient market really needs to be able to respond to demand signals with supply increases. But the basic human needs like food and shelter make this a little bit sticky. It is not efficiency that matters. Housing is a cornerstone of communities' quality of life. In areas that lack attainable housing, start to see decreases in general public health, academic performances, worker productivity, and much more. This is because housing plays an outsized role in individual and community outcomes. And there's a host of research to show that the need for housing to be available and abundant to live productive, prosperous, and happy lives. So this supply skepticism throws us off just a little bit, and we feel these gaps in our housing ladder when there's fewer trick-or-treaters coming to our door each Halloween, when we have to wait a year to reschedule a dentist appointment, and when our kid's favorite teacher moves out of state because they can't afford to grow their family here. And it's because a large number of households get stuck in either an enormous queue of waiting to be selected for housing assistance programs or a highly competitive queue of households not able to qualify for subsidy or afford market rate, looking for that rare condo or townhome to pop up on the market just in reach of their price range, but also close enough to their existing community. So what is impacting the current state of building? Guess what? It's basically the same things that made it hard 20 years ago, just maybe a little bit more compounded. The cost of land has pushed up home prices even further out of reach. And we all want our homes to be safer, so we've added policy layers, structural standards, fire codes, and environmental standards. But while we're at it, we also added less life-saving policies like parking restrictions and setback requirements, and added even more complex permitting processes. So add to this the ability for anyone in the general public to challenge a project with a lawsuit and frequently delay it for years, and you start to see why we have to keep talking about this. But it's not all bad. In recent years, we have started to see significant course corrections. Notably, in the last several years, our region has come together to address shared challenges of housing and infrastructure. First, by joining a regional housing compact, our 7 cities, the county of SLO, and SLOCOG move forward a housing and infrastructure regional framework that provides tools to enable each jurisdiction to position the region for more housing. There's also been a host at the state level in recent years that are just starting to be felt locally. But with all of this, it can't come soon enough for struggling families in our region, or households in our region. We have seen historically defined affordability standards in relation to the area median income. And many jobs that are traditionally middle class are beginning to slip down that economic ladder. This is especially hard felt by households with children in our county. A recent study that we conducted with the Brookings Institute found that 37% of households with children struggle to be self-sufficient. That's covering basic needs while also saving for emergencies and a minimal retirement. And this shift gets even more dire when we start to look at not just current, but future residents. The numbers start to look very bleak. This is a recent study here from the Turner Center looking at how difficult or comfortable every county in the state is positioned for future residents. And SLO County is one of the worst. Once again, this is why families are leaving. This is why local businesses are struggling to expand. This is why companies that would be investing in world-class innovation hubs here are slow to commit. And I'll end my section here with this quote from Joseph Stiglitz. What is demanded in a market economy depends on who has income and wealth. And in SLO's housing economy, we all get to decide who can afford to live in SLO County by demanding a complete and abundant housing continuum. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and introduce our panelists today. Give me just a second here. My screen won't stop sharing. There we go. Today we are fortunate enough to have Scott from SLO, Ken from People Self-Help Housing, and Damien from Covelop. And if you guys want to join on this screen, just going to give a quick intro to each of you. So Scott Collins here is the Executive Director of the Housing Authority. Over 18 years career, Scott has delivered lasting results in a variety of government settings. Internal to SLO, Scott directs major departments, including housing development, client services, and facilitates budget decision-making processes. Externally, he manages complex projects while connecting residents, businesses, local officials to increase support, strengthen the links between stakeholders, priorities, and the limited resources of SLO. Currently, in this evolving landscape, SLO provides affordable housing for 4,000 households throughout SLO County. We also have Damien Mavis co-founder and principal of Covelop Inc. After graduating Cal Poly San Luis Obispo with a bachelor's in mechanical engineering in 2003, Damien co-founded Covelop, a full-service real estate development firm. He manages both residential and commercial development projects in 10 states, navigating the complex regulatory and entitlement processes before handing the projects over to a construction team. With a focus on diverse housing options that fall in the continuum of affordability without the benefit of tax credits or other subsidies, Covelop is currently in entitlement and development of multiple missing middle housing communities totaling over 600 homes just in SLO County. We're also joined here by Ken Dragero, CEO and president of People's Self-Help Housing. Ken joined People's in 2005, has served several roles, and in his current role, Ken utilizes his extensive 30-plus year experience in banking and affordable housing to innovate and transform many distressed investments into homes for those most in need. Ken also holds a degree in agriculture business and management from Cal Poly and an MBA in financing and banking from Golden Gate University. Ken additionally serves on the board of House Farm Workers and Housing Trust Fund Ventura County. Currently, People's Self-Help Housing has built 1,200 affordable homes for over 5,000 residents throughout Central Coast. And there are 1,000 more homes in pre-construction pipeline, with 62% of the applicants being from SLO County. So thank you all so much for joining us here today. I think this is going to be a great discussion. Really looking forward to hearing from you on these challenging topics. So with that, I'm going to just jump into Scott. I know that you have extensive background, at a city and at HASLO level, and that retention of extremely low units is absolutely vital for those most at risk of homelessness in our community. Can you share some recent successes in retaining and expanding the number of very low income units in SLO County?
Yeah, thank you, Michael, and thank you everyone for joining us today on this important topic. I'll just give you a couple examples. Most recently, and it's been in the news, is the Anderson Hotel in downtown San Luis Obispo, a 100-year-old hotel that was converted into housing in the late 70s. HASLO got involved in the early aughts, and we took on a lease with the owner. Fast forward to 2020, they were looking to sell to a luxury hotel developer, and everybody got involved. This is a true community project. City, county, state, our Congress member, Salud Carvajal, all said, you know what, we need to preserve this historic asset, but also the 66 units of affordability. So HASLO jumped in. We didn't really know what we were doing or what we were really getting our hands on, but it's been such a worthwhile project. We just completed that last week, and we already moved in 6 individuals who had been placed in other units while we did the work, and we'll be bringing a lot more folks in over the next couple months. These will be permanent supportive housing units. What that means is these individuals are either homeless or at threat of homelessness or have other special needs like drug addiction or mental health issues or combinations thereof. So we have wraparound services that we provide to our tenants there with on-site managers as well. So we're very excited about it and just want to thank literally everyone in the community who's put money up for this, the city of SLO, county of SLO, the state, to Homekey, Salud Carvajal, putting $2 million in, plus ARPA funds. We couldn't have done that without all these folks. But it does go to show how costly it is. This is a $50 million project. So we're talking almost $900,000 per unit. That's what it takes to make sure this 100-year-old building continues to stand for another 100 years. Aside from that, we are adding nearly 200 new units of affordable housing, or we have in the last couple of years, plus another 200 that are either under construction now or will be at the end of the year. So very excited about that. Those will be a mixture of projects for seniors, families, as well as those with special needs. And then there's another column of projects that don't get a lot of attention. Frankly, I understand that. When you have folks run for office, they want new shiny things. They want to add units to the mix, which is totally understandable and justifiable. But we also have assets that are 30, 40, or 50 years old that if we lose those, that is not helping one bit. So we need to find ways to invest in those aging assets that oftentimes cost as much to build brand new. We're trying to figure out,
Scott.
along with Ken and others, how we can do that to ensure that these continue to provide affordable housing into the future.
And just jumping in, when we're saying aging assets, these are things that are really keeping people housed and
Right.
not sliding back either into homelessness or, being unhoused.
100%.
Right.
Yeah, we have about 36 apartment complexes in our system, and we're looking at about 10 of those that are going to need major reinvestments in the next 5 to 10 years, and there isn't a lot of money available for those.
And you hit on a little bit with the Anderson Hotel of, how many tranches or layers of funding were needed. Do you foresee that being more, less, equal to that endeavor going forward? I mean, there's a lot of players there that you mentioned or kind of rattled off that were, all integral in making that even possible.
Yeah, I think when it comes to those permanent supportive units, particularly those where you're remodeling either a hotel or motel, like what HomeKey does, it typically takes that many investors, because not only is it costly to do the work, but you also need the ongoing operational support. A lot of these HomeKey projects are failing after 3 years because there's no state subsidy after those first several years. So that's where vouchers that we provide become the underpinning of making those units affordable, not only to the recipient, but also the owner of that asset. And we're partnering with Ken, hopefully on another project, another HomeKey project here in San Luis Obispo like that.
Thank you. And you queued Ken up for the next question, because I'm going to throw it his way. Ken, according to a recent report from Housing Partnership Affordable Housing Needs Report, there's about 7,800 low-income renter households in SLO County that do not have access to affordable homes. Can you paint us a picture of what types of occupations you're seeing from these applicants and how that's maybe changed over the years?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I'm familiar with the report, and I totally believe it, because just on our own wait list, we've got 8,000 households right now. So that may be even underreporting. I don't know, but the point is well taken. Who we're talking about, you ask, is grouping in terms of industries, if you will. Really, the highest percentage are folks who are engaged in or supporting agriculture in some way. And the next is hospitality. That's a big grouping, and that can be folks who are working in hotels or tourists serving. There's a lot of variation there. That's a big category. And then it's industrial, so factory, manufacturing, warehouse workers, maintenance, construction. Healthcare support is the other big grouping there. So folks who are working to support medical offices and in hospitals, private caregiving, big category. Administrative, working in offices throughout the county, excuse me, and in education and childcare services. As far as what's changed over time too within those categories, hospitality is really growing in terms of the need. Those folks who are working in hospitality and need affordable housing, as has healthcare. Again, the housing follows the jobs, right? As somebody used to say, the affordable housing is where the jobs go at night, right? And so that's what we have seen, and that's what's happening in terms of where it is. Where they work too, I wanted to make a point, is predominantly at small businesses. So this workforce, these frontline essential workers, if you will, are really supporting and making these small businesses that we have viable. The other thing that is changing or trending too with our applications, and we're processing about, I think there was about 900 last quarter, is a high prevalence of female head of households who are the applicants. That last quarter was over 70%. So that's what we're seeing. And the household sizes too are getting smaller. Right now it's at 1.9, so under 2 people per household that are the new applicants. That means we're trying to provide affordable housing that's including more 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. We're just not seeing the need and the demand for the 3s and the larger ones. So that's what's trending, I would say. And I'll stop there. Go ahead.
No, that's great context. Also great to kind of connect in again some of the larger picture what we're seeing to how we're connecting those essential workers. So, really curious what challenges you face in achieving the level of affordable permanent housing support.
Yeah, so we've made such great progress in a lot of areas. We do have land, and we're finding properties, and we're able to control those sites, and then we're getting approvals, through a lot of these new state laws and different things that are happening. That has all been going in the right direction, and we've been getting more and more public support at public hearings. So these are all really great things. Right now, the biggest challenge, we're back to needing some more funding. The costs have escalated, the sources of financing are getting reduced. So that right now is the critical bottleneck for us to be able to do more. The good news is the structures, the systems, the way we do the financing is there. It's still out there. Primarily, the low-income housing tax credit program has been functioning back since 1986, came out of the Tax Reform Act, has had bipartisan support all this time. And, no matter what happens with elections, we're all pretty hopeful that that will continue. But we need more to be allocated to that program so that we can meet the numbers. There's just not enough allocation. The numbers being the demand, the needs that are out there. So it's a good news, bad news. Bad news is, there's just not enough dollars right now. And especially at the local level, we just need a little bit more support. So that's kind of how things stand right now.
Sounds like support and some creativity, probably.
Creativity is welcome.
All right. Well, jumping to Damien. So Damien, we know that workforce housing is essential in supporting economic development in a community. We also know that workforce stretches, across the gamut, as Ken maybe just mentioned, and then up into middle-class jobs and above. So if you can share maybe what is meant by this missing middle that we've talked about when it comes to housing, and then speak to your experience as a builder in regards to the number of missing middle households needed in SLO County.
Sure. Thank you, Michael. So the term missing middle was coined by a architecture firm called Opticos Design. They're out of the Bay Area, but it simply means it's a range of house scaled buildings that would have multiple units in them that would be compatible with like a single family neighborhood. So think duplexes, triplexes, townhomes, even small apartment buildings, but definitely stopping short from a scale sense from like apartment buildings that you would think of with 4 stories and elevators and things like that, and structured parking. So that's kind of outside of it. So the idea is with this compatible scale, you have this higher density product that fits sort of within the landscape of an existing single family neighborhood or as a neighborhood in and of themselves in larger developments. I guess maybe incorrectly, often it's used to describe this affordability gap of people that don't necessarily qualify for below market rate subsidized housing, but certainly can't afford a single family home. So I guess the connection there is missing middle can often help fill that affordability gap. And then as far as, what is the, how many units are needed or kind of what is the appetite, I would say in a way it's almost unlimited. Home builders, from a for-profit standpoint, we're a for-profit developer and builder. And so we can't really efficiently build below market rate housing like Scott and Ken do, because we don't have the access to the grants and the different financing mechanisms. And since the 1930s, the United States has had this sort of insatiable appetite for single family homes. And so that's what home builders deliver. And for a variety of reasons, exclusionary zoning, construction defect laws, et cetera, it's been hard to build condominiums or shared walled, sometimes referred to as, missing middle housing types in California. So that really has become an underserved market and an underserved like rung of the ladder. So the idea of starter homes being a condominium or a townhome with so little supply, their prices are kind of artificially held high. But I think with interest rates going up and affordability going down, home builders are now kind of refocusing and are much more open to the idea of missing middle and condos, townhomes, et cetera, and the idea of a missing middle compatibility with single family home neighborhoods, I think goes a long ways to making that type of housing more widely acceptable into existing neighborhoods as well as new neighborhoods.
I might just jump in on there because, there are some times where I've heard, I don't want to say sometimes, frequently, I hear, we build this type, who wants to live there? Do people really want to give up a yard? Do people really want to be connected by a wall? And I think the answer is solidly yes. But, what we're seeing here is, you mentioned limitless, right? Is that it's limitless because there's such a huge gap right now, right? Like that gap is so vacant in the availability that anything that comes on the market is just getting snatched up. Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly. It's very underserved. So I think the condo projects that do come on the market, sell out pretty quickly, as well as it's just so difficult to afford a single family home for, the workforce. And as a percentage of the homes that are being built, the below market rate housing can only serve so many. So there is really this, like, I guess, unlimited demand for affordable housing that maybe isn't deed restricted.
Yeah. So I know that you've been passionate about this for a while, at least tooting this horn of missing middle for a long time. And I think the conversation around missing middle has kind of changed in the last few years. How do you see maybe that change taking place and what new challenges are you seeing?
I think people are warming up to it, both from obviously the builder or the demand to home builders. They're seeing that they have to meet their market where they are, and especially with higher interest rates, that means that they need to be building more modestly priced housing, and this is a way to do it. And then there's all sorts of other knock-on effects of being able to build more community-oriented designs with more diverse housing types within a particular neighborhood, kind of going away from that standard suburban single-family home zoning where maybe all the houses fit within a very small price range band and very similar housing sizes, and really caters to a particular type of household. You'll see a lot with missing middle, the big diversity in housing sizes, number of rooms, et cetera, within a community, and can really cater to much more diverse buyer pool, which also helps mitigate maybe some of the inefficiencies of building that way to the home builder.
All right. I'm going to pass it back to Ken, and maybe Scott, if you want to jump in on this one as well. Help us understand what's working best right now for achieving affordability, and maybe how we can broaden that community, or maybe how the broader community can support your efforts.
Well, one thing to mention that's more recently becoming more and more effective, and I think starting to move the needle, if you will, on this need and crisis, is working collaboratively, nonprofits with for market rate developers, where we can make use of these efficiencies that Damien is talking about, putting on our expertise hats that we each have, coming together and getting projects approved all together that really are a mix of incomes and designs, and shapes and sizes to fit, all these various things that are needed. It's definitely, we've all realized, I think, that there's not one silver bullet to fix all this, and we need all kinds of stuff. And that way it sort of broadens this burden, if you will, of what needs to be done and paid for through a broader base, and not just burdening one group or developer. So we've seen some really great things where, for example, some market rate developers are able to get a master plan community moved forward and donate a piece of land, but it's approved all at the same time and it fits and it feels right. And so those are also great opportunities for the affordable developers that are doing all that we're doing on our own too, but can do more on top of that, thanks to these relationships. So that's a new and creative approach. And the community, when they support that kind of thing, helps us move faster and quicker. And those are the things that we need to do, because if we're not moving quick enough or fast enough and don't have sort of the known outcomes, then we're all less likely to step forward or take these risks and do more things. So that's one thing I think that I want to put on folks' radars. We could really use support for those collaborative, wider approaches to doing projects.
Scott, do you have anything to add on that?
That would be my exact response. Partnerships between People Self-Help and SLO, as well as partnerships with folks like Damien and other for-profit developers. I think we're really trying to figure out as a county, and have been more successful at it recently, like, what are our strengths? What are our individual strengths, and how do you pair them up to get things done? So definitely pull yourself up by the bootstraps type of county, because we don't have a lot of money. But I think we're punching way above our weight division in the last several years because of that.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of people have really risen to the challenge. It's just a very large challenge that will take a long time, right?
Yes. Yes.
So maybe to that, when we talk about permitting, for example, that can traditionally be a major holdup or a barrier, right? That increases the cost of development. Where have you seen maybe some improvements, and what types of improvements could we focus more on?
Yeah, I'm not gonna use the bludgeon on permitting staff or planning staff. They're sort of at the mercy of the labor market. It's really hard to hire these folks, and all of the myriad direction provided by the community and leadership. I think the main issue has been ourselves. Damien, much nicer than I am. But we made policy choices in the past to exclude people straight up. Full stop. We did that maybe under the guise of protecting viewshed or parking concerns or traffic, but in a lot of ways it was meant to exclude, and we're done with that. At least we are as this county, and I believe that as a state, we are done with that model. It's outdated and doesn't work. It leads to horrific outcomes on the education side, where you have declining enrollment. It leads to, I think you mentioned dentists, that's bad, but what if you have a serious health ailment and you can't get into your doctor for 6 months, which I've heard personal anecdotes from friends and family members here. You can't, as you said, I think Ken had mentioned, small business owners rely on housing to be successful, in addition to larger agencies like Cal Poly or the cities or the counties here. So, we have a major hole to dig out of. And it won't, what got us here was 20 to 30 years of decision-making plus some bad breaks economically, like the Great Recession. We're still trying to catch up from the production decline from that in the late aughts. So we need something to help push us along on the economic side. Because I believe folks like Damien want to build more missing middle, but they're finding challenges financially to do so. So we need a combination of some luck on the economic side and consistency. What we have now at the state level and local level is a lot of support for affordable housing development. We need to see that be consistent over decades and not just a flash in the pan. We're in a crisis mode because guess what? The economic cycles don't always catch up to policy decisions. It does often take times for the economic cycle to wind up in a good way. Had we had where we are pro-housing designation policies back before the economic crash, and the odds we'd have a lot more multifamily housing than we currently do. So I think it's sort of aligning all those things, but the main thing is just to keep on this pro-housing move. We all are benefiting from that. It just takes time.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Damien, I'm going to jump back to you. Do you believe that a well-planned new construction can mitigate the impacts of growth? And maybe are there levels that a community character will need to change to allow more people to live here? I know that Scott kind of alluded to some of these choices, but how do you see that as a builder designer?
Well, I think specifically that's what kind of got me excited about this missing middle housing typology, because there's kind of two forms of housing development. There's kind of incremental growth, like infill, like finding a lot or two or redeveloping a lot within an existing neighborhood. And, if you can make, four units look like one unit, it's just visually much more compatible with the surrounding neighborhood if it's a single family home neighborhood. And you see that in, gosh, some of the most expensive neighborhoods in San Luis Obispo, kind of the first ring suburbs with the historic homes. If you look closely, you'll notice that a lot of them are duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes, and they blend in seamlessly. So I think promoting that is important, and it is community character and adds to the community character. And then from like a greenfield development or starting from kind of raw land where you're able to plan and develop a larger development. I also think that this, missing middle helps produce, more varied housing types that, again, if it's immediately adjacent to a single family home neighborhood, it doesn't appear out of scale, and it's not, a skyscraper by any stretch of the imagination. Has the same people, walking their dogs, doing the same things, the same ways as any neighborhood would. So I feel like, once they do get built, they do integrate, quite well, and it helps. It's an alternative to kind of that monoculture of, suburban neighborhood development that has become so popular, where, all the apartments are in one spot, all the townhomes are in another spot, and all the single family homes are in another spot, and everybody's sort of scared to mix that up because they're all worried about their housing values. And, that's a phantom that doesn't necessarily exist, but people are concerned about it. So I think the more we can kind of integrate these housing types, the better.
And I want to touch a little bit more on the people concerned piece. So we have, or you gave an example, really being very intentional about the impact and the design. I think there's the general character with that, but walk us through how much time community input adds to a project, and maybe how those costs can impact the overall affordability.
Sure. So, I think constructive community input is great, both positive and negative. That doesn't bother me. And a lot of times, even some of the negativity exposes issues that we haven't thought of. So I'm all for that. What is increasingly much more difficult to deal with, obviously in California, we're subject to the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, as kind of the foundation of how we get projects approved. That's been twisted in recent years and been used as a weapon And increasingly, and we've been targets of it, you know, there are certain labor groups that will come out at the very last minute and drop a 200-page letter on the desk of the community development director an hour before our hearing, and that, you know, just needlessly stops the process. And that is an almost impossible thing to put in a pro forma or put in a timeline. You know, the possibility of getting stopped for between a day and 2 years if there's a frivolous lawsuit. So I think to the extent, so that stuff I think is just completely unacceptable. And as a state, we need to stand up to that sort of abuse and realize that it is impacting housing of all types. And there are bills that are coming through Sacramento that aim to curtail that, but it's still right here and now something that we deal with every single development. And that type of input is really awful.
Thank you for sharing. So I have 2 lightning round questions for each of you, and then we're going to open it up for questions. See what this group. We have a pretty solid list of participants here. Hopefully they'll be sending us some good questions. So participants, get your questions ready. But lightning round was really hoping, I have 2 questions. Let each of you respond. Just give as succinct as you can, and then maybe we can expand on some of that through the Q&A. So. Ken, I'm going to start with you. What is the biggest opportunity and challenge facing housing development on the Central Coast?
Yeah,
Summarize in about a minute.
Okay, will do. My top one for challenge as I started funding, not enough. The opportunity Proposition 5 is on the ballot here in November for the state. That could move the threshold that's required to get a local housing bond approved to a lower threshold. We've always been pretty close to getting these. That could provide an opportunity for our local folks to approve something later on, to get some bond money in here. We just don't need a ton of it. We need a little bit that could really leverage the resources. So that's the big deal, I think, for me.
Awesome. Ken, anything to add to that? Sorry,
No.
Scott.
Oh, okay. Oh, darn. I thought I had another turn.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Scott,
Prop 5, 100%. Look at it, do your research. And yeah, as Ken said, would sort of align us to what schools and community colleges have right now to do major infrastructure improvements instead of 66.6%. In other words, right now, 33% of the community could be against the housing bond measure and stop it. This would lower it to 55%, like at community colleges and our high schools and middle schools and elementary schools. So that's our biggest opportunity, I would say.
Right. Damien, biggest opportunity and challenge facing housing development.
Well, I think as a citizen, talking to elected officials and making sure that they understand that, housing is a top priority, and then them disseminating that information to, the community development director and planning staff. And, they just need to hear that if it is indeed a priority, they need to hear that it's a priority and, be rewarded for producing housing. So I think starting from the top and having that, trickle down through the municipal staff is quite important.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. I have at least one question coming through. Feel free to post some more questions to me. We have, again, a little bit more time to do some back and forth Q&A. We're happy to go a little bit deeper on some of these. First question really is asking us to dive deeper on the benefits communities of diverse/mixed housing and income. So I think Scott hit on this. Ken certainly has hit on this before. What could we maybe dive in a little bit deeper on some of those benefits to diversifying and mixing the incomes in housing developments? And maybe if I could, if we could split the benefits of being able to build in that way and the benefits to that community living in that way. That one might be a little bit harder, but Ken, I think you had mentioned, some of those partnerships, talking about how to building in that way. Maybe if you could expand or go in a little bit deeper of why that's a benefit now.
Yeah, right. So I was making the argument on the building side. So that way we affordable housing developers have more opportunities to have a piece of land come into our sphere, that we wouldn't have otherwise. So that's just pretty obvious on that side. And then on the benefits to our residents, we see a lot of research, and even at the state level, they are now incenting us to put to cite the affordable housing in high opportunity areas. What they mean is like close to all the good stuff, close to the school, the library, the parks, and everything like that. And there's just a great benefit that when people who have been, especially if they've been disadvantaged or locked out of accessing some of those kind of things, now they're in a location where they can really see and be a part of those opportunities. So that's a big deal. They talk about like being in the right zip code matters in terms of what you're able to do in terms of making use of those opportunities. I think that's a biggie.
I would add to that, if people are familiar with the idea of blue zones, which are these areas of the world that, have much greater than average life expectancy. One of the big things is community. It's living around your peers, being in walkable places. That happens with diverse community. Aging in place is a big deal. If all the houses are two-story suburban houses and you have a mobility issue, you probably have to move out of the neighborhood, and there goes your potential support system and friend system. So having diversity in housing types, I think, helps there. Obviously, raising children in a more diverse neighborhood has, untold benefits. I mean, so many. I think it's Singapore that actually gives you a tax break if you live near your aging parents, because they recognize that that is such an important support system. So all of those things are kind of enabled by a diverse community, both physically, the diverse housing types, and from a social and economic point of view of who actually lives there, a combination of renters and homeowners, et cetera. So I think that is very important for the health of a community.
Right. And I'll just add that, America's great experiment in the last century was the creation of a middle class. And the creation of middle class was feasible because of the GI Bill, right? It actually created a middle class where one didn't exist before. And we're seeing the hollowing out of the middle class because of housing. If you need $1 million to buy a home in a community where years ago it was $200,000 and attainable, something's not working. And so if you have the breakdown of the middle class, you no longer have what's kind of made America so special and unique. So it is a very fundamental thing beyond the sort of the more tangible kind of immediate benefits. It's sort of like, do we want to continue having a middle class in our nation? Because this problem has been exported across the whole nation. It's not just the Central Coasts. So I think that's the major benefit to our long-term viability as a nation.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in on this one too, because, I think, especially when we're talking about mixing incomes in communities, you think about where somebody lives, starts work, goes to school, sends their kids to school. Those are things that entrench people in that community. And by mixing the incomes and the affordability, you allow people to move around within their existing community or existing neighborhood as their families maybe expand, grow, contract as the kids move out, without moving to a completely different neighborhood, right? And I think that is a very solidly missing piece of this, where we look at somebody who's currently in a two-bedroom house and has two kids and has a third kid. Their question is, where do they get a three-bedroom house? And if it's not within their community, they're looking at different schools. They're potentially looking at longer commutes, further time away from their families. And that's a big component that I don't think we talk quite enough about. But we have the data on why families are leaving and why families are struggling. And this is all mix of that. So I was also just reminded logistically, I think I've said chat a couple times for your questions. There's a Q&A button. If you could please use that for your questions. So got a couple more coming through. This one's on zoning, which might be a little deep for some people, but talking about zoning in the county as a whole, maybe city of San Luis was asked in the question, is zoning and density allowances lend themselves for clustered multifamily housing developments? Do you feel like we have zoning down to where we can build the housing necessary for this?
From affordable housing development, yes. Most of the laws recently passed and approved by the governor and the state have benefited us, who are building subsidized housing. And so it's, whether a city likes it or not, I would say that the city of SLO and the county and many other communities here are supportive of this, regardless of what the state done. But the state has basically handed down mandates that they cannot impede our ability to build pretty much everywhere with a few exceptions. But I'm not so sure that it lends itself to what Damien and team are trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think since the question was asked about San Luis Obispo City, I think that they've done a great job with zoning and having some of their approvals done at ministerial or staff level for smaller developments. Plus, in a lot of their commercial zones, they do allow residential density that's conducive to apartment type of density. So I think that they've done well identifying roadblocks and trying to remove them.
Yeah, and I might just agree that we're again moving in the right direction with a lot of these policies. There's still things to be hashed out. There's still application of it, but it is going in the right way. This next question's maybe a little bit bigger. Everyone wants to live on the Central Coast. What can we do to make housing more affordable? What is the long-term solution to accessible permanent housing? It's like a whole webinar in itself, but I'm gonna leave it open for the group.
That's a hard one. I think my response was it took us years to get here. It'll take us years to get out. Not one single project, not one single policy, not one single funding stream will undo all that. But there's a great cocktail of things that are moving us in the right direction. This is going to take a long time. But both presidential candidates are talking about potential national fixes. Maybe different approaches, but both candidates are talking about it, which it's been a long time, if ever, that a serious presidential candidate, we're talking about housing. So there could be some potential zoning fixes there at that level, or continue expansion of tax credits, not only for the builder side, but on the demand side with individuals getting greater tax credits for rentals or for down payments, et cetera, which could really expedite affordability. Just some ideas there.
And I would say, I think what needs to happen more, if we're going to really, again, move the needle even further, is we're going to need to continue to change the narrative in a lot of people's heads. The people who don't need housing are still not helping, and they haven't connected the dots. But we're doing that today on why it should matter to them. It's a bigger picture. It affects us all, this issue. And so I say that in front of this group because I feel like there's probably a lot of folks that are and can be awesome ambassadors in our communities and our neighborhoods to just say that message in the form of maybe housing is the solution. Housing is not a problem that when new projects come along or propositions come along. Hopefully we can get more of our community to understand that doesn't recognize that now, that housing can be a solution. It's just how do we make it the best, and then everybody's voices are important to answer that. But that's really, I think, the focus that we all can do more on.
Thanks, Ken. I think anybody who's been around me long enough probably has heard my soapbox on that same point that, we really have to just not want it to be this way enough, right? Like a lot of it really just comes down to public will and saying, this actually has to change. And the example I use is, everybody we talk to, will say, yes, we need more housing. Yes, housing affordability is a challenge. And then when the ADU goes up next door to them, they go, oh, maybe not right here. Or a large housing development makes them think twice. And it does come back to that, that instinct that we have to react to change. And we have to realize that we need the change, right? It has to be strong enough to overcome some of that. Damien, anything to add? Didn't want to jump in I'm just throwing myself in as a panelist now.
I would just say that slide you put up of the housing continuum that went from homelessness to above market rate or market rate housing and everything in between, realize that it's like this massive spectrum of potential issues and solutions, and there's no one size fits all. I think one thing that's missing is kind of a wide-based funding mechanism for affordable housing. Whether that's a local bond or something like that, where, we all realize that it's a problem worth trying to solve, and we're all willing to, take a bit of financial pain to solve that problem. And I think that that's, super important. I mean, I think that that's the way that it will be, that we will make incremental progress. And then touching on what Ken was saying, elected officials listen to public testimony. And so I would say advocate for housing projects that you like, and realize that it really does make a difference when we're up there proposing a housing project, that there is support of the public. It really does make a difference.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we need to probably wrap up questions now. I'm going to do maybe one more lightning round question. I know this group particularly spends a lot of time thinking and talking about how policy decisions impact our community. If there's one thing you would like to leave this, large group with, what policy decision would you want them to focus on, have in their mind, especially coming up to an election year? Scott's ready, I can tell. Go, Scott.
Yeah, Prop 5, look at it, research it, do what's right for you. Number one, because that you could bring local decision-making authority back here, where we can do something locally about it. And then just broadly speaking, I think Damien mentioned it, talk to your council members and your mayors. They need to hear from you, because whenever a project's brought to the room, and I know this is the prior city manager, you're rarely ever hearing from the side of yes. It's usually the side of no, because it's protecting a vested interest of that individual or neighborhood at the expense of your grandchildren, your teachers, your firefighters, your cops. Those are the people impacted by those no votes.
Should I go, Michael? I was going to quickly say that maybe for this group, especially if you can talk to your legislators, I'm thinking really at the federal level, because coming around after the elections, no matter who wins, we need a tax credit improvement act that really is going to boost our abilities and funnel some more resources through private investment. I'll just leave it at there. It's a public-private relationship. And while you got them on the phone, if you care about this missing middle too that we focused on as well, there is a tax credit for the middle, if you will, that legislators are talking about. So voice your opinion if you care about that too.
Thank you. Damien, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I would just echo what Scott said. Talk to your elected officials. We need to hear the voices in the room, or that are the people that are not yet living in the housing development, to speak up and say that they want to be there.
Thank you so much. I just also want to say thank you three for being just a wealth of knowledge and for taking the time out of your day to answer our questions and to humor some of my back and forth. Appreciate it. Kim, pass it to you.
Yeah, so again, everyone, thank you to the presenters today. Just a wealth of knowledge, a very complex subject, and you've done a masterful job of boiling it down to the most pertinent points. You've left us with some incredible things to think about. And so I want to thank all of you so very much for your time and for what you do for our community. This is just so incredible. I do believe that there will be a slide coming up that will have the websites of each of the organizations represented here today in case you would like to learn more about what they do. Michael has graciously agreed to share his slides. So again, this meeting is being recorded. It will be available in a few days for your viewing along with Michael's slides. And just a quick note on behalf of the League of Women Voters, I think we got in under the wire for this webinar because this becomes a very busy time for us, and we have a lot of events going on, especially in the month of October. So please check out our website and check out what's going on, and stay tuned for the next Lunch with the League. I'm sure these topics will inspire more topics yet to come. So again, thank you, everyone. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you to the audience for great questions and great interaction. And enjoy the rest of this beautiful day on the Central Coast.
Thank you.
Thanks.